I'm very surprised that I've had these experiences in certain movies that have really been impactful in some way, often surprising, even Hocus Pocus and, LA Story or Ed Wood, Mars Attacks, Sex and the City. These are all things that they've been resonant with people for many years. I feel that's an unusual experience to have more than one of those, and I feel lucky. Hocus Pocus. I've only seen it once. I saw the premiere the week before it opened. I guess there was a premiere in Los Angeles, and that's the only time I've seen it. So I'm often not able to answer a lot of questions. I mean, there's a big anniversary right now, so I did an interview, and I've been reminded of some stuff, but mostly I only see something one time. It's preferable for me. It's not pleasant for me to watch myself. When you're watching, at least I find myself in a movie, I feel like I'm paying attention to things that I think are less important than the story that it's telling. Sometimes you're experiencing the day that you were shooting, but I really do think audiences remember much more about it than I do. I remember more the experience of shooting it than I do the story. I'm not entirely sure I could tell you the main characters' names, the children's characters' names, but the process of shooting was very long. It was an unusually long shooting schedule because I think of the special effects, and actually a bunch of people got sick, so we shut down for a while. Somebody said to me, well, were you surprised it wasn't a bigger hit? And I was like, I had no idea. I thought it was, and I remember specifically the weekend that it opened. I was in Los Angeles still, I guess, because I was out there doing press, and the phone rang very early on a Saturday morning, I think, and it was Jeffrey Katzenberg, screaming, we made $9 million. So my experience was it was a great success. Well, it certainly made its money back. LA Story. I got a call from my agent, and there was a casting director in Los Angeles. I think her name was Mindy Marin, and she was casting this new Steve Martin movie that he'd written. And I love Steve Martin, and knew a huge amount about his work and very particular things about the way he worked. And so I loved him, and I very much wanted the part, but it seemed like a real long shot to me. And for some reason, I understood her. I thought I understood what I sort of assumed Steve Martin imagined as he wrote this part, and I enjoyed myself. It wasn't an audition where I was really nervous, which one can be. And then I just kept getting called back, and I did a screen test with Steve Martin, which was really fun and, terrifying also. Then I got the part and got to play it. Sandy in LA Story is, she has no definition really. She's sort of this sort of floating, ever-changing, this person who's soaking up other ideas of a definition or an identity, and she's foolish and silly and doesn't seem terribly bright. I mean, she's probably brighter than she lets on, but for some reason I think she has to. Maybe she's more attractive if she's not smart. Some memories on movies become sort of mushy. You remember an experience rather than specificity, but I remember vividly many scenes. In particular, I think from the beginning I had this idea that she would be moving all the time. That wasn't really written so much in the script or the bouncing. There was specific movement that was almost written as stage direction and almost like choreography, but there was others that I just started doing, and eventually the director, Mick Jackson, who I loved, and he had done great films in the UK and in London. He would eventually just get to the point where he just had a megaphone. He'd say, and bounce, and action. He would just tell me to bounce around. But yeah, I sort of remember all the scenes, and time off camera as well. Sitting, waiting, kind of staring at Steve. I guess for some people it feels a little bit like it's a little bit, an amber. It was a very specific time and a way of observing the larger sort of ideas about Los Angeles.
I'll have a decaf coffee.
I'll have a decaf espresso.
I'll have a double decaf cappuccino.
Do you have any decaffeinated coffee ice cream?
I'll have a half double decaffeinated half cap with a twist of lemon. You coming to
I'll have a twist of lemon.
My guess is that they'd be still really accurate. Honeymoon in Vegas. I think I got the part in Honeymoon in Vegas because of LA Story, and that's what Andy Bergman told me when I met him. I didn't even audition for Honeymoon in Vegas. They just offered me the part, which I really couldn't believe. I couldn't believe. I'd never been offered a part, especially a lead in a movie, and like a real major motion picture, And she wasn't similar at all to Sandy, which is what surprised me about, being cast based on LA Story. But Betsy in Honeymoon in Vegas is really bright. She's a school teacher. She's a professional person and shows up every day and is, in fact, very conventional, which is the opposite of Sandy, who defies all convention and doesn't believe in any conventions, period. Betsy is like a teacher who believes in kind of rules and like a model for living. But funny, because she's written by Andy Bergman, who's, one of great comedy screenwriters.
You brought me to Las Vegas and you turned me into a hooker, Jack!
I read with all the men. There were many auditions and screen tests, and it was very apparent to everybody the minute that Nick came in. I mean, there was just nothing more to be said and nobody else to meet. Working with him was fantastic. I mean, it was truly great and inspired and fun and, surprising, very, very surprising. And it just made my job easy in a way. I mean, it's not easy, but there was really like the most perfect example of listening, responding, because he's so compelling, opposite. And I loved him. Working with James Caan was incredible. He has this very kind of amazing thing that I've never seen in another actor's eyes in my entire life. And I've stared across and looked in the eyes of a lot of actors, and especially male actors. His eyes actually flicker. I've not seen anybody else's eyes actually spark. They sort of have flashes in them. It's really something. And it can be both terrifying and, seductive. But when it's terrifying, it's really quite something. Ed Wood. Tim just, had been pondering this, making this, telling this story for a very long time, and he just had like a wealth of stuff for me to read and look at, and that was really important. But then there comes a point where you're just trying to be real, given your script and like the scenes that I had to play. I think the harder part is just I really wanted to mimic those scenes that we were recreating, which was an amazing experience. Like we were really like within like the scale, like everything. And to me, that's the thing I wanted to be most authentic about. The rest of it you can't quite do when you're playing somebody real. You don't want to, then you get too caught up in things that you have no control over. But the recreation of those scenes was hugely exciting and like fun to sort out and get right. And I listened over and over again and watched those clips over and over again. I think they're pretty close. Working for Tim Burton, and that was the first time I did another movie with him shortly after that. And he's just absolutely fantastic to work for because he's so clear, it's so specific. Every frame is, you understand so well what he wants. I think his specificity is enormously helpful. You're like really fitting into like a painting that he's kind of already created, and I like that. I love working with Johnny Depp. I thought he was really sweet and great to work with. Great on the set to everybody, human, deeply human, and just loved his work. He loved his work. He loved being an actor, and Martin Landau played Bela Lugosi, and he won an Oscar. It was thrilling and so deserved. I mean, he'd been around for so long and he'd been doing great work for a really long time, and he was such a good, kind man, so humble. He was a journeyman. He was just working all the time, and so happy to be working when he was. And he was a great, lovely person. Mars Attacks. Tim Burton just asked if I would do Mars Attack, and I said yes. I mean, anybody would have. I mean, when I read the script, I was like, really? All right, sure. I mean, I just think anybody would want to work with Tim Burton and would want to do, no matter how strange, kind of help him fulfill his vision. I wasn't at all familiar with those kinds of movies. I mean, with the exception of familiarizing myself with Ed Wood genre and those movies, I didn't really know as much the movies that he was sort of kind of recreating in a way. You kind of do what you're told in a way that I really like. There's always a really strong costume designer whose point of view is like playing a really pivotal part in what an audience is experiencing, and the hair and makeup department's always really strong. I mean, there's all these other creative influences that are helping you so much. I turned into, was it Her Dog? I think it was Her Dog.
Natalie, is that you?
Yeah. How are you feeling?
Pierce Brosnan was involved in that. Was he like a wild, like a crazy scientist, like a mad scientist?
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. The Family Stone. I love that part, and once again, that was the kind of part I'd never played that before, and I really liked it. I mean, I was very nervous in a way making that movie, not daily on the set, but trying to figure it out. And Tom Bazooka, who wrote and directed it, Tom was really helpful. Tom was really, he was strict with me in an interesting way. He wanted me to play this part, but he also wanted pieces of me gone. So it was interesting, and I was very happy to, I didn't feel that he was not appreciative of what I have to bring or my own skills, but he wanted something else for me, and part of that was really scary because it was being watched in a way, I felt. And I was intimidated by Diane Keaton, even though I had known her. We did First Wives Club years before, but this was so intimately, we were in each other's faces so much, and I wanted her to like me. And but I loved that movie. I was really proud of it. I was proud of everybody's work. I was proud of my work. And when I saw it, I loved it. I mean, I really loved it. I love Craig T. Nelson. I mean, the whole cast many people have gone on. There were some folks in that movie who were relatively unknown at the time. Not unknown, but, Rachel McAdams and Elizabeth Breezer, these were actresses that were just starting to emerge. And, and I thought Luke Wilson was so great in it, and Dermot. I thought there were such great performances. Sex and the City. That part and that story and that, I think they are so daily in my life, in ways that are, probably very obvious, and then ways that aren't, whether it's, people on Instagram or walking down the street of New York, or people seeing me, or me having a memory of a, cross street where I shot, 24 or more scenes. So I feel like it's not far away, but the experience is in many ways. And I feel, for the most part, I feel fine about it. I mean, I had hopes that we would get to make another movie. And I was excited, I think, because it finally felt right in the story. So I mostly feel great. I love where we got to leave all of them. I think they're all probably doing really well. And still enjoying that friendship and their city, or maybe some have left. Charlotte might have finally moved to the suburbs, my guess is. But it's it's a real privilege to have that, not just the memory of the experience, but have the connection with the audience that was initially, along with us and discovering us. But today, a whole new generation of young women stop me literally every single day of my life to share their feelings and thoughts and affection for this show and the movie. And that's a privilege, and it's a professional blessing, no doubt. It's not so much that I feel Carrie within me. I mean, we would have stretches of time and then we'd come back to work and you would sort it out pretty quickly. You'd rediscover like a muscle or something that is slightly atrophied on a hiatus, so you find that stuff very quickly. But it's part of you in ways that you can't. It's hard to articulate the ways in which it's in you. It's part of your memories. It's part of your most important professional moments and years and time spent. It's, incredibly sentimental and nostalgic. But the character isn't in me because she's somebody else's creation, really. And I long to play other people and other parts. But if asked to find her again, I could manage. Here and Now. Well, the character in Here and Now is her name is Vivienne, and she is a singer with relative success in New York. She's had a career that is both a source of pride and frustration. The movie really is a story about a woman who gets a diagnosis, and it's a portrait of this next 24 hours in her life as she absorbs this information, and it's about love and loss, and I think coming to terms with the role you've played in your own life and the relationships you have with those around you and with the city, that both loves and betrays you.